I'm Anton, and I live in Canada. I work for IBM. I manage a little team there. We create applications using IBM's APIs and take them to customers to try and give them a sort of hint about where the future is going. At least that's what I try and do. These are some examples of my work. And today I'm going to talk about kind of a passion project. So managing a team is kind of a headache sometimes, so it's really good to have a way of blowing off steam. I've been programming since I was 11, and I don't want to lose it. So this project sort of started a couple of years ago when David Bowie died. I was really surprised at how sad I felt about him dying, and I wanted to understand why. I find myself watching lots of videos and interviews and concerts, and it occurred to me that he had all of these different faces, these different personas throughout his career. So I was sort of really interested in understanding if when he was putting on his different hairstyles and his different clothes, if his writing changed as well, if his personality changed, if the message that he wanted to tell was different. And so I used some artificially intelligent software and natural language processing to build a little social network of personalities for each of these different Bowie personas. And I'm going to talk more about the way that I'm measuring the personality in here, looking at the albums and the words that he was writing. So I did that a couple of years ago, and since then I've sort of wanted to explore more artists. So this talk has sort of three different parts to it. The first part is looking at personality through natural language. So I'm going to explain the process of looking at lyrics with natural language processing and measuring personality from it. And then the second part, I'm experimenting with CSS Houdini, the Paint API. And quick show of hands, how many of you have heard of CSS Houdini? So that's about 10, 15%. So good, we're going to learn something. And some web audio. Who's worked with web audio? Quick show of hands. Even less people. So yeah, okay. So 3 parts to the talk. So the first part I'm using, it's a commercial piece of software from IBM called Watson Personality Insights. But don't panic, because you can get 1,000 free calls every month, so you don't need to pay anything. And there is a Spanish language version of it as well, which I'm not going to work with here, but you can. Let me just get back to that slide. So I'm going to go through quickly what Personality Insights does, just by working through the demo of it. So as it says here, you can gain insight into how people think, act, and feel the way they do. It applies linguistic analytics and personality theory to infer attributes from a person's unstructured text. So for any body of text that you give it, so here we're going to use the example of Barack Obama's presidential debate. It can take the text and analyze it and break down the personality traits within it. So here he's saying, there are a lot of points I want to make tonight, but the most important one is that 20 years ago I became the luckiest man on earth because Michelle Obama agreed to marry me. So it's his words. And we hit the analyze button. And you can see it gives a report back. And there's lots of different dimensions to it. So in the summary, it's saying you are heartfelt, analytical, and strict. You're philosophical. It has areas where things that he likes. So he likes musical movies. He's sensitive to ownership costs when buying cars. And then there are different other ways where it's measuring the personality within there. So the bit that I'm really interested in is this personality section. There are 5 different categories within it. So openness, conscientiousness, introversion or extroversion, agreeableness, and emotional range. And this is really going to test your translators, I guess, because there's lots of sort of psychological terms in here. So here you can see he's measuring 94% on openness. And it says that openness is, he's intellectually curious, he's emotionally aware, sensitive to beauty, and willing to try new things. And then for each of these, there are subcategories, so you can break down all of the sort of detailed information about what makes him so sort of open, whether it's with his emotionality or artistic interests. So that's sort of an overview of the actual product and the natural language processing that comes from it. Let's just get back to the slides. And so those 5 big personality traits there. Has anyone studied psychology? Any psychologists in the crowd? Anyone raise their hands? No psychologists? So these are 5 real sort of psychology traits. And actual real psychologists use this. So openness is the appreciation for art. So open-mindedness, conscientiousness is like how organized you are. Extroversion versus introversion, so how much energy you show outwardly versus inwardly. Agreeableness is how well you work with other people. And the emotional range is your degree of stability within your words. So here's the idea. We take an artist. They've written lyrics for songs that go on albums. We take those lyrics, we play them through Watson Personality Insights, and we get back these 5 personality traits for each album. And then we can start to compare the artists over time. So this time around, I was really inspired by Coldplay. Please tell me that I'm not the only person in the room who likes Coldplay. Quick show of hands if you like them. Or at least if you... Oh, good. This is a better result. So I actually took this photograph from their concert in Philadelphia 2 years ago. And it's kind of mind-blowing. I mean, this is my view. It was so colorful. The music was really upbeat. They had confetti and balloons and fireworks. You can see Chris Martin here, just barely, on the stage. And it was like a drug. And I know I shouldn't really make that comparison in Medellin, but it felt like a drug. It was so uplifting. It was really amazing. So I wanted to, when I left the concert, I really wanted to sort of understand more about how their music has changed throughout the years. So I started drawing again, and so I drew these different phases of Coldplay's career, and Chris Martin doesn't change as much as David Bowie, so it kind of made it a little bit easier. But they do keep a distinctive look for each of their albums. So if you ever watch, the period of time when they're touring, they wear the same clothes. So Viva La Vida is the most iconic one, but they sort of stick to the same sort of script for each of those albums. So that was my starting point, understanding each of those albums. And so I'm going to walk through this app that I've built. So this time I wanted to try and visualize it a little bit differently. I only use plain vanilla JavaScript. I'm phobic of things like React and Bootstrap and stuff like that. So this is just really flex boxes, and the graphs are just flex boxes widening, 2 flex boxes widening and shortening with some animation tweening in there for it. And you can see it's transitioning through each of the different phases. So it's pretty simple. You can sort of pick and choose each one of them and compare them. So notably, if you look at this album, Ghost Stories, compared with A Head Full of Dreams, you can see that there's a really big difference between the agreeableness and in A Head Full of Dreams and Ghost Stories. So you can see it's getting really short. So he wrote Ghost Stories when he was breaking up with Gwyneth Paltrow. And the music in there is really reflective of his unconscious coupling, he called it, or they called it. So it's it really reflects the the sort of introversion, so it's 11% extrovert. He's really introverted, not willing to agree, but very, very emotional. And then A Head Full of Dreams was kind of the antidote to that, so it deliberately tried to be more upbeat, it deliberately tried to be more colorful. And you can see that sort of playing out through each of these albums. And so I've also sort of drawn that out in more of a chart form where you can see as well. So things like Viva La Vida was the most open album that they've made. And you can see A Rush of Blood to the Head was the most extroverted album, and so on. So it's pretty cool what you can find out just by looking at the words and using the software within it. So that's sort of the background of the project. And the basic way it works. I'm going to write a blog post about some more observations later, but I don't really want to go too deeply into that right now. So when I sort of made this project, I really wanted to try and simulate the confetti, to try and get the confetti in there as some kind of measurement this time around. And you may be a little bit underwhelmed at what I was able to achieve, but I'll show you how it works. So I'm going to use this thing called the Paint API, which is part of the Houdini specs. And Houdini is the sort of emerging next generation APIs that are coming with CSS. There are a ton of them, and they're all really super interesting. The Paint API is one of the most mature ones. And it allows you to draw using the Canvas API. Quick show of hands again, who's heard of Canvas? HTML5 Canvas? Or used it? So that's probably about half of you, which is good. So Canvas is a drawing surface within JavaScript that lets you use sort of coordinates and geometry to draw on a surface. So I'll show you how it turned out, first of all. I don't know if you can see. So we have some confetti working in those same areas. And I'm going to show you how it fits together. And you can see that it's still obeying all of the same rules as the other HTML that didn't have the Houdini pieces on there. So what the Houdini spec lets you do is make custom CSS classes. So if I was to sort of drill in here and select one of these bars, it's going to be really hard for you to see, so you might have to take my word for it a bit. But here at the bottom of the screen, let me move it up a little bit, you can see that there's a custom CSS class, and in there it has attributes and parameters like confetti color, confetti limit, confetti size. So with that, I can change the size of the confetti pieces to be bigger. So let me I've just fumbled a little bit, and now I've hit a break point. There we go. So if I make this confetti size, say, 10, you can see that the confetti is getting bigger, or I can make it smaller. So the confetti gets really small. So this is CSS. I'm controlling this through CSS parameters. And I can do the same thing with color as well, because of how I've defined it. So if I say purple, you can see it's turning purple. So it's pretty cool. You can get to make your own custom classes that way. So how that works is, this is the anatomy of a custom CSS class. So you have a class called my paint class. In my case, it's called confetti. This is the standard section where you get the properties. So I've set properties for the confetti size, the number of confetti pieces, the color of the confetti in there. And then the paint function is where you get all of the goodies, like the context for drawing on, for the canvas, the geometry, so the size of the area that you can get to draw on, and the properties, the actual settings for each of those things, like the confetti size and the color. So with that, you need your HTML file, where you have the ID for the DOM element, where you're going to put this thing, and the CSS class on there as well. The JavaScript file for your custom class, a CSS file where you declare the instance of the CSS type that you're making, and then a Java file to register that class in there. So if we look really quickly at some code, so here are the CSS classes. Make them a bit bigger. So you can see that it's got the confetti color, the confetti limit, and the confetti size, and then it has a movement in there. So for the confetti to be animated, it needs to be in an animation loop. You can't do that within the Houdini spec, so I'm cheating. I'm doing it outside of the Houdini spec. But if I change any variable in there, it will redraw. So I'm changing the movement number every time just to make it redraw. Within the confetti JavaScript code, this is following the description that I just gave. So we have the input properties. We're returning color, size, the limit, and the movement. In the paint part of it, you can see that we're getting the values for those settings, so the limit and the size, and we're putting them into sort of global variables that we can use later. And then in the draw part, we've got, this is just standard HTML5 canvas code in here. So it's just following the conforms of like normal canvas code. And I can show you the actual canvas code in a second and show you it's no different. But really, you're just creating little rectangles for the confetti pieces. I'm randomly moving them around and putting them on an array so that I can track them and transform them and make them move around the area. And then, I'm working with the sizes that are coming in. So it's all sort of describing the class and the behavior of it within there. So that's sort of a breakdown of how that's working. I'm going to show you another example. So this time, I don't know if you can see it clearly, but these are stripes. So there's diagonal stripes filling each of these boxes. So it's just another sort of variation on it. You might see it a little bit more easily if I go in and change the custom properties. So if I make the stripe width be bigger and the gap be smaller. Let's see if that works. Let's try again. Oh, it's one demo too far, I think. So changing the size of the stripe gap. It's because I'm at an angle, I think. Let me see. There we go. And the stripe width, I'm going to make it smaller. So you can see that the stripes are changing. And again, you can change the color in here. And that's all sort of handled dynamically through the CSS settings. So really, it's amazing that you can start to make your own dynamic backgrounds and put them wherever you want. It could be the background of the page. It could be, a circle. They'll conform even to if I was to put border radiuses on these things. You can see that it's curving. So it's amazing what you can do with it. You can get all of the sort of standard power of CSS, but with your own custom color settings in there. One thing that I sort of forgot to show you was the code for getting all of that data to begin with. I feel pretty proud that my demos here today are, all of the data mining was done with Node. It's served from a Node server. So we've got JavaScript in the data mining and the server side, in the visualizations, and in CSS. So four places we're using JavaScript right through the stack with what we're doing. So this is the code for actually doing the data mining. It might be a little bit too big. So you can see I've got like a list of the different albums that Coldplay made. And then inside here, I've got text files with all of their song lyrics in them. So what we're doing is just looping through each of those text files, doing a read, and then calling Watson Personality Insights. So it's really neat that it's one single line of code, and it gives you back tons of data. So it does all of that and puts it into a JSON file. I can show you quickly what the JSON file looks like. So you can see it's got like a percentile for artistic interest, percentile for personality, and it's a huge file. It's got so much data in there. And then really all I'm doing within the code for rendering the page is just doing a XML over HTTP request to read that data and start breaking it down and drawing all of the different sections within it. So it's pretty simple. Okay, so the last part, to go a little bit quicker. So quickly, here's some tips for building your own CSS classes. So first of all, try and think of ideas to enhance the user experience. Like my sort of idea for this came from trying to make confetti to match the confetti they used in their concerts. Prototype with just HTML5 canvas, first of all, and get that working. Then create your test skeleton for the new class. You can follow the rules in the slide before this. And then move your canvas code into the skeleton and then sort of experiment how you like with the different variables in there. So the final part was, how can we influence the confetti with sound? So the web API lets you play with web audio and get sort of the measurements of amplitude and frequency and things within there. So this bit is super experimental. Hopefully we'll be able to hear it, but I'll show you it working. So you can see the confetti speeding up. So I'm probably going to get in trouble with some kind of licensing for that bit, but it's you can see sort of how it's working there. I'm no sort of expert in trying to marry the way that the confetti moves to the music, so it's really, really experimental. But just to give you a quick sort of overview of that, all of this code is open source, and I'll share the link with you in a second. So for the web audio sort of part of it, you again get an audio context, and from that audio context you can set up a way of analyzing the node and getting the amplitude from it. So within a loop in there, and for getting the amplitude, I'll show you, I'm doing the same thing. So it's using just CSS style setting on those properties for the color and the size, and I didn't have a lot of time to experiment with it, so I'm just saying if it gets really loud, then make the confetti a little bit bigger and change the color of it. And it was sort of effective. You can see that it's beginning to work, like it is tracking to the volume of the sound. So I think it's pretty cool, the power that you can get from all of that. Okay, why does any of this matter? I feel like asking you that question, but this is what I think about it. So for one thing, Houdini opens up new options for being creative. You don't have to think about using any kind of like images and divs and stuff anymore. You can actually draw to the boundaries and resize and work for different sizes of screen and get it to behave differently, even within divs. It's really, for me, this is the most exciting thing, being able to lay out stuff. I've worked a lot with Canvas in the past, and it's a nuisance drawing complicated things, but with layouts like Flex and Grid, you can mix and match for using a bit of Canvas within your CSS and laying things out and reusing them. And then you can start to create your own libraries for reusing visual components of it and sharing them. And then finally, the natural language sort of analysis, although I'm using it for like personal understanding of these artists, there are real business cases for it in understanding your clients and understand, like you can use it in social media, you can use it in anything that they've written, letters, even sort of recording someone and analyzing it in real time, you can do that sort of thing. So there's really neat ways of understanding other people and also yourself through using that. So that's a really fast overview of CSS Houdini and the web audio stuff. You can get all of this from my repo. It's all open source, and you can contact me on Twitter if you have any questions. Thanks so much, and Juliana, thanks a million for having me. I feel really lucky to be able to come here. Thanks.